G'day, HM Hart here, and in this podcast video, the topic is the borderline in my life is devaluing me, and maybe they cheated on me even, but they're devaluing me. How can I get them back into idealizing me? What do I do? Let's get into this and explore this. So I got a comment, as I get many amazing comments, amazing but sad and some tragic, yes, but well-articulated comments, people really looking and needing help on this topic, among others. And so a commenter writes on a video of mine, I'm in a relationship with a person with borderline personality and currently going through the devaluation period. She jumped up and left me a week ago, cheated on me. We argued and broke up numerous times. How do I stop the discarding that comes? She said she loves me, so I'm just confused. How do I get back to the idealization phase? How can I prevent her from walking away from us? Let me just first say, this is a tragic, sad, and very, very painful place to be. But when you're in a relationship with someone who has BPD, and they're devaluing you, and then this commenter said, and she just jumped up and left a week ago. The first question I would ask is, are you really still in a relationship? Or did it end, but you don't want it to be over? And also, this commenter says he was cheated on, and the argument is they broke up numerous times. So how do you stop the discarding that comes? And it could be a final. It's not really a discard with BPD. It's a cutoff. It's out of sight, out of mind. More complicated than really the narcissistic discard. And she said that she loved him. And as I'm recording this right now, another comment came in from the same commenter. And he then says, will my BPDX come back to her senses and come back? I'm in the devaluation phase for the last week. I love her, and she told me she loved me. She's slowly losing contact, and I don't know how to fix this. There is no fixing the devaluation that a person can suddenly be thrust into by somebody with borderline personality disorder. So that's a position that people find themselves in, and then further continue to keep themselves in that situation, trying to find ways to get the person to be able to fix why they've devalued you, how or could they ever idealize you again, and as I'm going to go on to talk about, whether or not they might idealize you again, and many might hoover back with that idea, or we might end up in that situation, and many won't, and you can't know who's who, and that's another problem. But the point is, you can't fix this. And this comment was left on a video that I did, these comments rather, that is called Borderline Splitting, the Cycle, How and Why Devaluation Ends. Well, how devaluation ends is when the relationship is over, because even if the devaluation ends, it will be temporary if they go back to idealizing. That's when relationships are on again, off again. If a relationship has devaluation, the split to devaluation, and the relationship doesn't break up, often they don't really come back to idealize at all. It's not quite devaluation, and so the other way that devaluation ends is when people do their own work to take care of themselves in these situations, because the only other way it ends the devaluation of this commenter or people on the other side of people with BPD is when they go and they get the next person. So when they ghost you, when they leave you, and because they think it's got something to do with you and it doesn't, it's inside of them, they go on to the next person and the next person, and maybe it's the person per this commenter, that she cheated with. Who knows? But it's this childlike search inside of the borderline for the parent that wasn't connected to, or the parent that didn't nurture, the parent that caused, in 75% of people with borderline personality disorder, the attachment and the abandonment trauma in the first place. So devaluation, as I was talking about in that video, when it ends, it doesn't, it's often when the relationship has ended, whether you want that or not. You can't fix it. If they do come back to Hoover, or the relationship didn't totally end and the devaluation took place, they don't really come back to the same idealization. But even if they do, it's only until the next trigger takes them back to devaluation. And it's happening inside of them, and it's not about you. And in fact, that's why you're not seen or really heard. And people with BPD, until that's a lot of treatment, they don't even know how they're affecting you at all. Can you relate to this? Does this resonate with you? I just want to say, it's so compelling and it's so painful. And yet the other thing about it is chock full of not only painful experience that's really hard to catch up to, that yes, there's cognitive dissonance with, yes, you're going to feel like you want this person back, and like, of course you still love them, but the problem is there's screaming red flags here. And it's at this stage, among many other stages for many other people, that people don't realize it's so hard when you're feeling so much and your emotions are running so high. It's so very difficult, if not next to impossible, to not still have some investment in wanting, like the commenter asks, how do you get them back? How do you stop them from doing this cutoff, or discard as people call it, which is really more for narcissists? How do you get them to stop it though? Well, the truth is, it's a repetition compulsion in people with borderline personality disorder to end up with always a relationship rupturing for a myriad of reasons, because they don't really attach to you. And like this commenter said she loved me, and he's really confused. Well, of course, because the one key thing here to realize, if you haven't already, is that when they say they love you, and the borderline says that he or she loves you, she in this case, what does that really mean? I know what it might mean to you, but what does it really mean from them? They don't really attach to you. They don't really connect to you the way that you connect and attach to them. They don't really love you. They're not capable of it, especially when they're untreated, the way that you love them. And the answer to how can you really stop the ghosting, the discard, they're not the right terms really, but the cutoff, or just them leaving you. Yes, how can you stop that? It's not so clear that there's really methodology to how to stop that, because each individual person with BPD will be different. For some, they're gone. They made up their mind and they're not coming back. And for others, they'd be hoovering, maybe they'll come back. But here's the thing, really, and it's such raw pain for people in this position, in this situation. But why would you want them back? I mean, obviously, emotionally, understand that, right? Relationally. But why would you want somebody back who cheated on you, and then when you try to talk to them about it, no personal responsibility, fights or arguments ensued, and then they said they loved you and they just took off? And you're left in this suspended, very painful place of like, is this over? Like, I'm being devalued and I don't want this to end. How do I get this person back? How do I get them to idealize me again? And here's the thing about that. You really can't. It all comes from within them. And like I've said in other, videos or podcast videos, it has a lot to do with the arrested emotional development of borderline personality and what really happens in attachment and abandonment trauma and how that ruptures for them in their young lives, in young childhood. And then that gets replayed out over and over and over until they go and get enough therapy to understand what's going on and how they're relating. But the thing is, once they've devalued, sometimes they will come back and hoover and idealize again. Some will, some don't. But if they do, why on earth would you think that it would be any different? And I say this with empathy and compassion and understanding for the pain and the compelling nature of why you want them to come back. The thing is, you can't do anything to get them back into idealizing you any more than you did anything to get them into devaluing you. Because believe it or not, people with borderline personality disorder will get to devaluing people. These cycles, it's splitting, and the cycles of splitting will go on. You don't really do anything to cause that. Even if you've done something maybe that would upset anybody, you still haven't done, you don't initiate the split in the person with BPD that you're with or were with. It's already happening within them. And it's a repetition compulsion, which just means it keeps repeating because they don't know what else to do. And I think also it's very different. It is somewhat different when you've been with somebody with BPD, and maybe it's early on in the relationship still, but you really feel like you really love them or you love them. Well, then you get cheated on, and you're going to argue about that because the person with BPD is not going to take any personal responsibility for that. They may not understand why they did it, but it's inexcusable. So here's something I just want to add in here, right? People probably know this in some ways, but when you're in high emotion, it's not a healthy thing. Like, are you thinking about yourself at all? And may I say really gently with empathy, where is your self-respect? Did somebody who's cheated on you and can't even say they're sorry or take personal responsibility, but instead devalues you and cuts you off, takes off, no communication, and you want them back? This sounds very codependent. I think most people in this position would be in a world of hurt, not ready for something to end that way and without closure. But when somebody has cheated on you, what part of that isn't essentially, especially if you're in a dating phase where, it hasn't been that long of a relationship, even though you've got to this point of really loving this person, what part of being cheated on isn't a deal breaker for you? And I really mean this with, again, great empathy and compassion. People need to think more about themselves. And what is it that you've been through in your own childhood that you feel that you don't feel that strong sense of, that's it, that's a deal breaker. You cheated on me. What's keeping you from being able to just let that person go? Set a boundary and know this relationship is toxic and unhealthy. Just from the very nature of if somebody has cheated on you. So that's the number one thing for people to think about. And then the second thing is, so they've devalued you because they devalued you essentially because you tried to hold them responsible, at least this person. But in these situations, they will devalue the person that loves them, that tries to hold them responsible for cheating on them. Now, I know that can feel unbelievably painful and compelling to try to work out, but doesn't that sound a little, to your mind, not your heart or feelings, nonsensical? That you want to get this person out of devaluing you to idealize you again, to have the relationship go forward after they cheated on you, and the devaluation came about because you tried to hold them responsible for it. This is where people are showing codependent patterns. And I don't know this commenter, but it's likely a codependent pattern on this commenter's part. What does that mean? It means that the wanting for the person with BPD to come back to idealizing them and going on with the relationship, or maybe they want to just try to get closure even. That doesn't happen with people with BPD unless and until they get enough treatment. So the point is also, it's important to recognize here that people are, you're abandoning yourself. You are sacrificing yourself, overreaching to try to get this person, or in the hope that this person will somehow then idealize you again, and you can go on and continue a relationship wherein they've already, in this case, for this commenter, cheated on them once. Do you think that people with BPD, not all people with BPD cheat on people, but do you think that somebody with BPD or anybody in general who would cheat on a partner, would a boyfriend or girlfriend, would do that only once? That's pretty rare. So the other part of this that's really important, there's so many parts, but so the question, how can you prevent him or her, but this commenter her, from walking away from the relationship? Well, you really can't. And so the question, again, really needs to be turned around to yourself, to ask yourself, why do you want to? Why do you feel so compelled? What is it in your past? And this is a process of recovery for people to go through, by the way, and I work with clients with this all the time, successfully, to help people get through this, because there's something you're not valuing in and of yourself. You don't have enough self-worth if you're wanting to know how that you can prevent this person from walking away because they're in a devaluation phase. How can you get them back into an idealization phase? Well, you really can't. There's nothing you can do, because again, I want to stress that when a person with BPD devalues you after idealizing you in the honeymoon phase, and then will do this splitting off and on when they're triggered, and when they're triggered, it is still it's their issues and their responsibility, unbeknownst to many of them, that are triggering them. It's not you, it's not your fault. You can't stop them from walking away, and you can't get them to get back to idealizing you. So, like again, some people with BPD will devalue, walk away, and then eventually, or in some time, hoover back. And that's a dangerous situation too, because if you've been cheated on especially, but idealized and devalued, either raged at and or silent treatment, why would you think that if you can't get them to idealize you again, that if that's going to take place, that takes their time, it's their process, they don't understand it, they'll come back and hoover you. And if you take them back, if you re-engage again, what I can say about that is you're not going to experience anything but the same thing over again. The same hurt, the same pain, the same... If they idealize you again, they're going to devalue you again. Because in borderline personality disorder, whatever the behavior around this that's manifested, or whichever ways they act out or act in, without a lot of therapy, they do not change. And no, you don't have time to invest in whether they go to therapy or not. You can't make them go to therapy, can't rescue them, can't change them. And even if they do go to therapy, they might go for all the wrong reasons and make a bunch of false promises and quit therapy relatively soon after. Why do I say this? Well, because I have 25 years experience in working with people with BPD. I have 25 years experience in working with people who've been hurt like this commenter, and maybe like a lot of you who might listen to this. So what's really difficult about this is, yes, it's cognitive dissonance right off the bat. Yes, it's confusing. And the commenter seems to be extra confused on top of what would probably be just really a painful, confused place, that this woman said to him that she loved him. Meanwhile, not taking personal responsibility for having cheated, not having that conversation, and then doing the cutoff of devaluation. So if this has happened to you, or if this is happening to you, or if you fear this is about to happen to you, because you suspect now you're with somebody with BPD, what you need to know is that you can't have any control over them. And it's not what you do or don't do within reason that causes them to split, devalue you, sometimes come back and hoover and idealize you again, but only to devalue you again. And sometimes many people with BPD do not hoover, do not come back. And then people think, well, gee, somebody else is going to get the good side of them, and they're going to get help and change, and I'll miss out on the good stuff. This is all very compelling human emotion in these situations, because what people with BPD do doesn't make sense. But I'm just here to reiterate again that whether you've been cheated on or not, so let's say you weren't even cheated on, like the commenter, and a person with BPD devalues you, and you probably don't know why. They take no personal responsibility. They don't know how to discuss things. They don't know how to, join with you mutually in a conversation whereby they would take personal responsibility for their own reasons why you're being devalued now, because they don't know why. They don't know who they are. So the really compelling and hurtful and aspects of this that make no sense is, of course, people are devastated, traumatized, hurt, in so much pain, cognitive dissonance. But it's even more than that. If you want to continue on with somebody, and it's very confusing, but especially if they've cheated on you, and then they devalue you because you're trying to talk to them about why they cheat on you. You're trying to hold them personally responsible, and you might want to know if there's a way to dialogue about that, because the only way to try to save a relationship, if it was healthy enough in the first place, and relationships with people with BPD and untreated aren't, you would need that person to own that they cheated on you and see how that hurt you and understand what happened to you. People with borderline personality disorder, especially untreated or not significantly treated, don't see you. They don't know how you feel. They are in their own energy of often shame, triggered back to feeling abandoned. It makes no sense, right? That they would cheat on you and then feel somehow abandoned after they take off, or like people say, ghost you, and then why would you want them back is my question for people to really think about if you're listening to this podcast video. Because number one, if someone cheats on you, it should be a deal breaker. You need to have more self-respect and more self-worth than that. So then you need to ask yourself, why don't you? And it's a very difficult, complex loss if somebody just cuts a relationship off, devaluing you with BPD, and you don't get closure. And it hurts like hell. I'm not going to kid you about that. But the bottom line is, these are all the big red flags of why not to go forward. And your emotions are going to feel, it's going to feel compelling to go forward. But this is where you have to lead with your head. And I'm out here to help you if you want to work with me, because I work with people on these issues all the time, working on how they can get through this process of their own recovery, heal from what's happened, and also understand it better, and then know that you are worth more and find that self-worth and that healing that you yourself might need, this commenter might need, or anybody that resonates with this might need. And there's so much about all of this that is very painful, but it's about right now. There's a journey and a way through this so that you can actually, after that journey and healing and recovery, and it's usually involving working out codependency and maybe some other issues, you're abandoning yourself. Emotional nightmare and mess. And the answer isn't to chase the borderline. The answer is to put a boundary there, and it hurts and it's difficult. The answer is to turn with help and look inside yourself for how you can resolve this and move forward in your life in time. Hope that was helpful. Take care.